Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch, previously known as the Small Church Podcast. I'm Tony Marr, and with me is my friend Robert Kell.
Hey everyone, we're glad you're here. The Pulpit and Porch is where we kick back, put up our feet, and talk about real life stuff of ministry, faith, community, and maybe a little sports and pop culture.
Yeah, if you're expecting a perfectly polished sermon, you're probably in the wrong place.
We're more about those honest heart-to-heart conversations, like the ones you'd have on the front porch with friends. Sometimes we stay on track, and sometimes we take the scenic route.
That's half the fun, isn't it? Here we tackle the highs, the lows, and the in-betweens of church and of life. Every now and then, we'll welcome a few friends to the front porch and share stories and ideas that might just change the way that you see things.
So whether you're a pastor, a church leader, or just someone who loves the church, pull up a chair, grab some sweet tea, and let's dive in. Welcome to the Pulpit and Porch. We've got a seat waiting for you.
Good morning, Mr. Kell.
What's up? So I'm sitting here looking out one of the many windows in this room we sit in, and you just had a whole bunch of trees cut down.
That happened.
And you have a tree that's broken, that's leaning on another tree, and in the process of all this, they couldn't take that one as well?
Yeah, they were supposed to, and then they said that it was too much of a risk and liability.
I don't understand that statement. Weren't they a professional tree cutting company?
Professionals do that for a living. Yep.
Because I'm going to be honest, I feel like if I had my chainsaw, I could go out there and have that down in about 3 minutes.
It's a big tree.
It is a big tree, but I mean, it's already mostly broken. You just cut that one part and stay back. It's going to swing down and then it's just going to fall out. And it's far enough away from the house and stuff. It's hung in that tree. It's not going to. Then you just cut little pieces of it as it goes.
It's a great start to our show.
Speaking of chainsaws, you're having a small remodeling project done. When Melissa and I were first married, the house we were living in, we had to replace the oven. And we were trying to get that in, and we were trying to be thrifty, and we were like, hey, we're young homeowners. We can fix this on our own. We could not, by the way. And so our neighbor, I'm tying in chainsaws and home remodeling projects all together here. And our neighbor's like,
we're building a new porch.
We could.
On the Pulpit and
yes,
Porch.
Yeah. And he's a pastor as well.
A project and porch.
Yes. He said, I can help you with that. And I was like, that's awesome. So Mel's at work one day, and it was my day off at the church, and he happened to be off as well. And we were working on this thing so that we're like, this will be cool. We'll have this in when she gets home. And he comes over. He's like, well, I need to run grab a saw real quick so we can cut this, and this out. And I was like, perfect. He comes into my kitchen with a chainsaw, fires it up, and starts cutting boards out in between the cabinets and things like that. I mean, it worked, but I was like, I cannot, I'm like, Melissa came home. She's like, how'd it go today? And I was like, it went, and I'm so glad you weren't here. Like, you have a stove. She's like, yay. And I was like, and there might have been a chainsaw running in our house, and I might have spent most of my day off trying to clean up every ounce of sawdust in the kitchen. And she's like, what? And I was like, oh, I was vacuuming floors in the living room. I mean, all the things. I was doing all the stuff. And so, yeah, I had somebody help me do some remodeling one time on a house. They in our kitchen, a finished kitchen. It wasn't like it was like everything was finished except for this one part. We just had to replace the oven, and he chainsaw cuts it out.
Never heard that before.
It was, I haven't either. I've never done it since. And it was crazy.
So we are in a construction zone today. We're on week 4 of a bathroom remodel project. And I'm hoping that, it doesn't pick up, but if it does, we ask for a little grace, a little forgiveness if you hear some saws going off in the background.
I just heard one there a second ago,
I don't know if the mic's going to pick it up. Last week when I was editing our episode, I was sure that we would hear Kobe snoring in the background. Goodness. Didn't pick it up at all. So maybe the saws will not be picked up on this. This is high quality recording that we have going on here on the Pulpit
and
Porch.
She was like on my feet, like snoring almost in the microphone. So it was there. She was barking, saying hi this morning. She was a little extra today, I think, for you all.
So how's your bracket doing?
Oh man, not good. So we do that.
For those of you that are not kept tracking with where we're going, we are in the midst of March Madness right now.
The madness of March. And our family does, everybody does, you can do up to 3 brackets.
Cheaters.
It's just fun. And
that is, there's no integrity in that at all.
Well, ESPN only lets you submit one to count towards all the other stuff. So, I am at 50% on one and 89% on the other.
Wow.
So we'll see. It has a little fire emoji beside it. It was good. And what's funny is the one that I'm doing so well on, I only pick top seeds to advance. Well, for the most part, I do one where I pick pretty much only. I try to go very heavy top seeds and just see how that plays out. And then in like the Elite 8, I start really narrowing it down and making some different choices. But I'm at almost 90% on that one, and we'll see. But my middle son beats us to death in this thing almost every year. He's very thoughtful, very good. Melissa chooses by mascots or team colors or favorite flower of the state or something like that. I don't know, but that's what she does.
At the end of round 1, I was in the 98.5 percentile. I killed round 1. And then round 2, everything fell apart. Round 2 was bad. Round 2 was beyond bad. But here's the good news. Tonight is our fantasy baseball draft, and tomorrow is opening day, the official opening day. We had opening day last week if you're a Dodger fan, and we're already sitting at 2-0 on the season. But for the rest of the baseball world, tomorrow is official opening day.
That is true. I'm very excited. I have my MLB pass ready to roll.
Yeah, we got ours all set up yesterday. It is a good time.
Here's a little information for you. If you have T-Mobile, you need to do it quickly, and it may actually be expired by the time this podcast drops. But if you have T-Mobile, they give you the MLB pass for free.
For free. I don't have T-Mobile, but one of my children
free
does.
$99. And actually, I usually end up buying someone's thing. They people will sell them for like $10 or $15, and I usually buy one, and that's what I do.
How do you do that?
I've got a buddy of mine that, so like we've talked about this before, you love movies as well, but I really enjoy film and enjoy just being in nerdy things. And so I've got another friend of mine who's a collector of movies, and we talk a lot. We have dinner a few times a year, just to literally, we have dinner, we catch up on our families really quick, and then we spend a couple hours just talking about movies and, TV shows, things like that, what's out, what we're watching, how we think that's impacting the world, why we aren't watching some things. And he's got me into a couple of groups that you can buy digital codes and things for movies and stuff. People like buy a Blu-ray and like don't want the digital code. And so they'll sell it, and they can make a lot of times. I mean, if you get a brand new movie, so like Wicked has just come out on Peacock. I'm assuming that I don't think the DVD's out for that one yet. I think it comes out in a few weeks. But when that comes out, there'll be digital codes, and so people are like, I don't like digital codes. I just want hard copies. And so they'll sell that. That one might cost you $20 to get a digital code, but it's probably $27 online, or they'll sell it for a couple bucks less than what you can buy it for. So if it's $18.99, they'll sell it $15. And some people have the T-Mobile and they sell them in there. It's a little bit of a risk. I've not been burned yet. I'm 3, 4, 5 years in. I'm trying to remember how many. And I just try to look at highly ranked people that are on the site as best I can. And so landed a guy yesterday, great dude, and we messaged back and forth. He like wanted to make sure I knew how to get logged in. I was like, yeah, this is my, done this for a couple years now. He's like, perfect. And I mean, $15 and
wow.
PayPal, way they don't have my debit card and stuff, and PayPal, and done. And so it's really cool. And I just kind of jump in and do that. And learn something new every day, don't you?
Yeah, most days I try to. Yeah. But anytime that I'm around you, I'm learning a lot.
But yeah, I'm excited, man. It's your family is more playing basketball right now. If they play sports, they're doing basketball.
We're in a down season right now.
You are. So y'all are only watching
5 more weeks.
And so we are in our heavy season. Our 2 youngest boys both play for different high schools, but one plays soccer, one plays baseball. And my baseball kid, the team he plays for, it's his first year with them, but they were in the state finals last year for their classification. So it's a pretty fun, pretty intense. We play 6 games in 5 days or something like that. And the next couple of this coming weekend and then our soccer kid ramps back up coming out of spring break. And we've got a game this week, then like 4 games next week. And it's just, yeah. So I'm excited that baseball can travel with me, and I can watch these games while I'm on the road. So here's something that's fun. One of my other friends, Rocky's fan, and he said, hopefully your Braves can beat those stupid people from LA.
The Angels?
Yeah, that is not what he was talking about. National League. So I was like, that is fantastic. So I was like, yeah, I've got one of those friends and they're obnoxious.
Who?
I don't know who my Dodgers friend would be.
Hey, so we both like movies. We like to go to the movies. I've wanted to go to the movies for a couple months now. Just had that feeling that I want to go to the movies. I want to get a big bucket of popcorn. I want to sit down in a seat and I want to watch a great story unfold on the silver screen.
That's a risk right now.
Problem is there have been no movies. We have pulled up Fandango and looked to see what's playing probably almost every weekend for the past probably 2 months. And there's nothing that I want to spend the kind of money to go see that's worth it. For me to go to the movies, it has to be at least a 2-hour movie. I'm not spending $28 a person to go and watch an hour and 31-minute movie. Okay. I want my money's worth there. So the last movie that was worth my time and investment of finances to go to, I went with you to see, which was on Christmas Eve night or Christmas Day night.
And I don't know that it was worth our time and finances. It was fine, but it wasn't great.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. But there's a movie coming out in a couple of weeks that I'm excited about that I want to go see in the movies.
What's that?
Called The Amateur.
What's that one about?
So it's I'm going to get the guys Rami.
Yeah, he played
he was in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, he played the lead singer.
Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, Freddie,
yeah. And he's a CIA analyst that his wife gets killed. And so
I saw that
inserts
preview.
himself into the field to go get justice and vengeance for his wife. And nobody thinks that he has the skills necessary to accomplish the task because he's just an analyst, but he's the top CIA analyst. And he goes Jason Bourne. And I'm excited about this one. Looking forward to it.
I was looking on that does sound fun. I saw that preview. It looks very interesting. I was looking at the movies and I'm going,
I haven't seen what the runtime is on it yet. It better be at least 2 hours.
There's one that's like so to meet your standards, like this is crazy. 1:35-minute movie. I didn't know they made those anymore. I didn't think that was legal.
It's not in 17 states.
Locked with Anthony Hopkins. And
never heard of that one.
Bill Skarsgård and stuff. It's a thief breaking into a luxury SUV, realizes that he slipped into a sophisticated game of psychological horror. And so that would be an interesting flick. I don't know. I don't know if I didn't check any of the other details and stuff. Mel wants to go watch The Chosen. They drop those in like 3 movie parts. And so I think we may go watch that here soon. But yes, I would agree. There is 0 in the theater right now that I would go watch.
Everything's horror movies, and I'm just not into those. Don't enjoy those at all.
Yeah. Either like I just personally would have a conviction that I should not watch this movie at all, or I would look at it and go, I'm going to watch that when it comes out. Like, I'm not paying to watch Snow White in a theater. I'll watch that when it comes out on Disney, but I'm not going to pay, like you said. I mean, it's 5 of us go watch a flick. Even if it's just me and Melissa, if we get popcorn and stuff, you're talking $60. And so I'm not watching Moana 2 in a theater. Wouldn't watch, is it Mickey 17? Yeah, there's just a lot of this stuff I wouldn't.
Have you seen the first 16 Mickeys?
I have not. And it's funny that in the middle of 2 Disney movies, it was Mickey's the one that I mentioned, but that is not about mouse. So, but yeah, it's a weird world. Movies and theaters are a weird world right now. I think it's
and it used to be going into summer. Summer was the blockbuster season, and there were so many great movies that you were anticipating, looking forward to, waiting on, buying tickets in advance for. And that just doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
Well, and I think it's one of the things that, and I'm not trying to make a segue here. We can keep talking about this as long as we want to, but I think it's one of the tensions with the topic we're talking about right now and being attractional versus being discipleship focused with the church as we're finishing up this conversation in week 3 of this today. We've got so much in streaming now. And again, this isn't a new conversation for me and you. And I don't think it's a new conversation for the podcast. It's just so easy to make a film. And because it has lowered the bar for everything. And so it's just, movies are just so different. And there's so many things. Like Netflix has 0. There is not 1 ounce of profit and movement for Netflix to drop a movie in a theater. Why would they want to do that? They want you on your couch so that when the movie goes off, we were sitting at the baseball field last night and Mel was talking to one of the other moms and she said, "Hey, how was your day off?" And she's like, "It was good. I got a couple episodes done and of one of my shows. I was just sitting around and she's like, I thought I can't sit here all day." And I was like, that's the moment when I like go all in. I'm like, hey, I'm 2 episodes in. This is the rest of my day. And she was just like, yeah, I can't do that. And I just think that's one of those things. Netflix doesn't want us. Amazon is a unique, like you actually, if you have Amazon Prime, there you can go to like prime.com/tickets or something like that. And for Amazon movie releases in theaters, you can get 2 free tickets.
Yeah, and there are none on the horizon.
Yeah, and there's not a lot that they do it with, but it's one of those anomalies that they drop a few things in there with. They have a little bit of a connection to The Chosen and stuff now, so there's some things there. I just think that there's no win for these streaming services to put movies into theaters. And even the Disneys and stuff, half of what they're dropping goes straight to streaming. And so they're not putting good movies out there because there's no win in that. And I shouldn't say no good movies. They're not putting as many good movies. Because I'm like you, summer, and I mean, it's funny, summer being such an outdoor thing, but you stay outside until 8:30 and then you go to a 9:30 movie. And then, Christmas. It's always kind of starting middle of December, movies would drop until kind of end of the year. And you'd have some stuff come out, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And there was some good movies that would drop in that 2.5-3 week span. But I just don't. Gladiator 2, I was excited. They brought back enough people to keep me interested. Brought in a couple of people that got me interested. And it wasn't as bad, I think, as a lot of people say, but it definitely was not Gladiator 1. And that's just, I think, the world we're sitting in.
Yeah.
So I think that's tough, though, with this conversation we're having, too, is how does the church function in a space where are you not entertained? But the goal isn't entertainment. It never was. I mean, and not even for the Sadducees and the Pharisees. I mean, the goal was never entertainment. It was rules, and Jesus came to kind of fulfill, as he says, I didn't came to break, but to fulfill and to move forward with this thing, to give you a new way of living. And that new way of living is really a discipleship model. And I don't think inside of the church it's bad that we're attractional, but that's part of our conversation today.
Isn't that what we've made it, though? Is so many churches that's their primary driving focus is to provide something entertaining, something that people will be drawn to want to come to. Sometimes their motives for that are pure. Other times it's simply just that we want to get butts and seats.
Yeah. And no, I agree. And I think that kind of this conversation today is really wrapped around finding a balance in this as we step through. And I mean, you and I both value what happens in a sermon. We both value communication. We think it's important. If people are going to show up, they should show up for a purpose, for, it should be worth their while to be there. But what's happened is we've made it to where it has to be worth your while to be here, and not, hey, it's worth your while to be here, and it's going to be good on top of that. Yeah. And it's worth joining up with other believers for encouragement, for equipping, for community, and then to go out to do the ministry. And it's just really, really changed things. What do you like? What's your because again, we both value Sunday morning. We value good music. We value good preaching. We value good children's ministry. We value good, coffee. I mean, I value good coffee. You don't really drink coffee, but
value good water.
You value good water, and we fail you in that at Northridge and Irwin. Then, but I
bring my own.
You do. I do too. Typically,
BYOW.
Yeah. What do you think is a good balance in this as far as discipleship and attractional when you look at, and I don't know that I'm looking at I'm not necessarily asking for a percentage. You think it's 70-30? Because I mean, I don't know. I'm just wondering, what's your thoughts there?
I think the attractional should be the catalyst for the transformational. That you do the attractional, but only as a means to get people into the pipeline of discipleship. And so you want to do something to get them in the front door. And so you have to have that attractional element to get them in the front door, to have people excited about as we've talked over the last couple of weeks about the process, that you have to have a process, you have to have a strategy that's clearly communicated, that everyone knows about, that for 99.9% of churches, somewhere in that process is going to be multiplication, right? That we want to get you evangelizing. We want to get you in some sort of friendship evangelism, relational evangelism taking place. Your hope is that some component of that is bringing friends to church. You go all the way back to the 1950s and you would have homecoming and friendship Sundays and these times when you would have these specific, distinct targets towards bringing people in. And so you've got to provide something that people want, that people are excited about, to bring their friends, their family, their coworkers to. But that attractional, I think, is simply just done as a front door to launch people into the transformational. And so when we're talking about the balance, I think the weight needs to be more on the discipleship, on the transformational, that the focus that we're spending on the attractional is just simply a tool. It's not who we are. It's a tool to get people into the pipeline for what we're really wanting to do, and that's change lives.
Can I ask a question that, I guess you could say no. I wrote that. Did I say this? I don't know. I wrote this in my notes. Like, can I ask a question? It's like, I'm going to answer this anyway. I don't want to ask it anyway, so it really doesn't matter. If you say no, if y'all all leave, I'm going to say it to an empty room. 2 words, and you use them both there. How do you see the balance? I want to start here, and I have a little bit of a linear or a kind of a sporadic thought with all this. How do you see the balance of, or connection of, maybe evangelism and discipleship?
First off, I hate the word balance. And I know that I wrote that in our outline.
I don't. Oh, did you?
I did.
Oh, yeah, you did. It's actually, yeah. So, okay. Yeah.
I hate the word balance.
Then you're going to love getting older because you start struggling with that a little bit. And you're going to be like, yay, I don't have balance.
Balance. When we try to be balanced, and we're told our whole lives that we should be well-balanced people, right? And that causes us to spend more time and energy on things that shouldn't be our focus because we want to be well-balanced. When we're called, we're designed, we're created with certain bents, certain gifts, certain talents. And as a church, it goes back to what I just said, that if we try to be balanced between attractional and transformational, I don't know that that's what we're called to be, is an even 50-50 perfect balance there. Like I said just a minute ago, I really think the attractional is simply done as a catalyst for the transformational. And so if you're looking at balance on a teeter-totter, and I know we're not visual here for people, but except for you sitting across the desk from me, that discipleship should be way up. We should be really focused. That should be our goal, is transforming people into Christ likeness, right? Shouldn't that be the goal of the church, is to draw people into a closer relationship with Jesus, to look more like Jesus in their homes, in their workplace, in their life. And so we use the attractional simply as a way, like I just said, to get them started in that process. And so I don't like the idea of balance, that there should be a balance between the two. I think that if you're balanced, then you're probably putting way too much emphasis on the attractional, which I think is what a lot of churches do, is they put more emphasis on the front door rather than anything that happens once we get them in. We're so focused on let's just get them in and not what happens once we get them in.
It's an interesting thought. And when you were talking there, and actually in both of these things, and especially as you're talking about the balance and about the equal, it kind of even affirmed my thinking a little bit. I think back to Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Church. And he had the 5 purposes of the church. And one of the things he talked about is he kind of said, correct me if I'm wrong, it has literally been probably 20 years since I've read this book. And, but I feel like he talked about, in a dream world, your church would be 20-20-20-20-20. But in reality, that's never going to be the case, because you're going to have a season that you're incredibly high on evangelism and incredibly low on community. Like, you're going to see these ebbs and flows and things inside of what the church is. And I'm wondering.
Well, that's where I don't like the word balance. Correct. I like the word rhythm.
Yeah.
You got to find a rhythm.
And that's the whole thing. It's a lot like we were talking about with movies. Like, if a good movie came out in March, it was a win. It was a rhythm. Like, your rhythms were, you understood the best movies of the year, the things that were probably going to win all the awards, came out in a 3-week stretch in December and a 2.5-month stretch in the summer. And that's what you were going to get. And used to, churches could sit and bank on the fact that people are going to come sit in pews. And then that started to change. So now, attractional became the model because people weren't as interested. Like, how do we become their phone? How do we become their addiction? How do we do things to where they're going, oh my goodness, this is not what it's going to be? And I've heard these analogies, and I've heard so many different analogies. Like, I heard one the other day. I've got some friends, they were fine. They'd had something kind of happen in their family that they were having to deal with. And the wife said, I'm going to give my 2% and move on. And then the husband could deal with it. And I was like, so when it all finished, I was talking to a buddy of mine that was in the conversation. I was like, I don't know what 2% means. And they had gone through, and this is, again, just one model, just what they had heard, and it works for them, is the man's the head of the household. And so 51-49. And she's like, so I'm giving my 2%, like, I'm giving my 2%, and then it's you, and I'm moving on and going. And I've heard somebody else say that marriage is two people giving 100%, because it's not 50-50. It's two people both giving 100% every day. And I've heard somebody else say that it's collective of 100% total between the two people, and that sometimes one spouse will walk in and go, I've got 20. And the other spouse goes, I'll carry the 80. And it's the couple balancing. And I think that's probably, that last one there is probably the best idea of rhythm, of going, okay, we're in a season in our church where, I don't know what season could the church be in, where we are lower on the community phase. We're lower on our discipleship's trending down. And I also have another thought I want to ask around discipleship and evangelism, but Sunday morning attendance is really up. So we've got 100% here. What's filling the jar per percentage? And like you said, how do we create rhythms to where the right things are at the right percentage more consistently?
Yeah.
Here's another question. Do you think that the way, and I'm going to say it this way, because I think deep theology, we could probably get into some stuff. We read Matthew 28 2 weeks ago. We talked through that for a little bit. And I think it's one of those things, like, I actually pulled it up. I grew up in a King James world. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. Like, that for me always was a evangelism call. Go and preach the gospel, brother. Be the gospel preacher out there. Be an evangelizer. And, baptizing them, get saved, get baptized, and then, because that's the whole thing, and then teaching them to observe all the things. The NIV, and not just the NIV, a lot of other translations as well, go and make disciples of all nations. Do you think, and like I said, I just want, because there could be a whole conversation, and we could spend 6 weeks looking at 100 verses around, do we misunderstand evangelism? Is evangelism way different? Did Jesus have a different thought for evangelism than the way we treat it maybe in our culture of growing up? But just in the American church, do you think that we have gotten these things too far separated with evangelism and discipleship, and they're really almost the same thing? And it's this relational discipleship where we journey with people and we're sitting with them, and through conversation, through dialogue, through sharing stories, hearing stories, meeting a need where people have one, that's the evangelism that we really should be doing, that go into all the world and make disciples. And we've had these versions of the Bible that said preach the gospel or evangelize, this idea, which again is just somebody taking what the American or the English Bible says and not looking at Greek words and going that route. But do you think we've missed some of that? Or
I think all you have to do is look at the life of Jesus.
Agreed.
And he did the big events.
Yeah, he preached in front of people.
I don't think he liked it very much, though. You look at it, he didn't do it very often. And every time he did, it spurred much more time in Scripture was spent on the conversations that took after. As he and his 12 guys are bedding down for the night by the campfire, and they're asking questions and talking through things. So I think that he did the attractional, but Jesus did the attractional as a means to launch into the discipleship. And it goes back to what I've said every question you've asked this episode so far, is I think that's what we're called to do. I think that's what our rhythm should look like. And there are seasons, like you said, I think it was perfect what you said, that there's a little bit more weight put on that attractional. Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, these big times when you're doing a special event, you're doing something, there are things that you're putting a little bit more time, resources, energy into the attractional. But even in those events are supposed to be used. The reason we drop Easter eggs from a helicopter onto a lawn with 3,000 elementary kids running around with baskets coming up in a few weeks. The reason we do that is the hopes that there's something deeper there.
Yeah.
You don't just simply want them to come and get their Reese cups and never see them again. You're hoping that it's launching them into something deeper.
And so in that space, attraction has a place. Definitely
has a place.
And
an important place.
And doing some of those bigger events that can be this is so weird.
A church that is not doing anything attractional, that is not putting any time or effort into the attractional, is probably a pretty small church.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I mean, and that's it's
a generalization, but
yeah, and it probably doesn't apply to everybody, but I think that's definitely a good, a thought. It's definitely harder if you don't think about what people see when they walk in. It definitely can challenge and change your approach on stuff, and people are going to feel like they weren't seen when they walked in. But the attractional part allows you to be, and this is where I need a thesaurus, to be attractive to people so that they'll show up and sometimes give you a chance. And what used to happen is you could do those things on a Sunday morning. You could say, hey, we're going to do, it's such and such time of the year at blah, blah church. And we know they're going to do something fun. Let's go over there. And, college football week, kickoff weekend, and they're going to all be in football jerseys, and they're going to be giving out, chips and dip and popcorn and hot dogs. And it's going to be a spectacle. The pastor's going to preach a funny sermon, and the band's going to be great. They're going to sing, "Are you ready for some football?" And it's going to be a great time. And people would show up to this. I think we're at a place now to where most time people can watch that on at home, and they're going, I watch everything else on my phone. Why would church be any different?
I think you just brought up a great point, Robert, and that I'm a child.
I probably did.
I'm a child of the 90s. I was born and raised and grew up in the 90s, and my church leadership began in the 90s and then into the early 2000s. Things have changed a lot. Back in the 90s and the early 2000s, just about every progressive, I hate that word, progressive church, you and
I hate a lot of the words, but we use them because it's what people understand.
But you had a drama team.
Oh my goodness!
On every church, you had video teams that were going out and shooting man on the street videos and doing creative videos through that. You had every service had one or two songs that were not corporate worship songs, but they were songs that were sung that you would hear on the radio, and not Christian radio, but regular radio. You'd hear Coldplay or something like that was playing that tied into the sermon, and there was a lot more of this attractional elements that were taking place within our services. I said, I think it was last week, that it's been almost 10 years since I was a full-time lead pastor in a church. And a lot has changed in those 10 years, that our creative arts meetings were sitting down and mapping out our 75 minutes on a Sunday morning, what all was going into that, what videos were we going to be shooting, what special songs were we going to do, what dramas, sketches were we going to have that were going to fuel everything around the central message that we were looking at. But you rarely see that anymore. Most of the programmed worship services that take place around the United States are pretty straightforward. You're not seeing the dramas teams anymore in churches. You're not seeing the high production videos that are going out and being shot anymore. You're not seeing the special music much anymore that's being done.
And you're not just talking about churches like that you and I talk about, like the one that we attend, that I work at and you attend, where less than 100 people probably don't have the staff to do that. Or even if they just went out with their cell phone and shot it. I'm talking, like, I have not seen those videos. Who are the 10 largest churches in the United States that would be creative? The 10 largest, most creative churches. I definitely would put Andy, Louie, Craig. Sorry, Andy Stanley, Louie Giglio, Craig Rochelle, just in case somebody doesn't know them. Kyle Idleman. Incredibly creative.
I put Central, my home church, up there.
Yeah, Judd Wilhite to Central.
And back when I was there, they had a full drama and video ministry team that had hundreds. I mean, it was on par with any production crew that you would see anyway. And they would have every single service had some sort of drama as a part of it. And then they moved that into being video. And I mean, you're talking cranes and boom cameras and mics. And I mean, it was every bit a production that they would go out and shoot, and that was being done. But we've been twice in the last year, and there was none of that.
And you and I consume a pretty large amount of sermons and content and things like that. And there is not one. I mean, I sat just a week or two ago in a preaching conference. It was a one-day preaching conference, and there was a little bit of mention of like, hey, do you like to do? But it was nothing along the lines of how are you implementing more of the arts really into your space, which is really what we're talking about is the arts. And do you and so the thing is, so two things. I have this statement, and then I have another thought. None of the churches that we just mentioned that were all doing this type of stuff. I remember when Andy Stanley and them did Santa Went Down to Georgia. Like we've spoofed that song, or not spoofed it. We used that song and did it and at a church at Northridge several years ago. But that was over a decade ago. That was back in 2013, 2014 that we did that. It's these things of like, I haven't seen any of those. Like you mentioned Judd and those guys. I haven't seen them do any of those types of videos. They don't post them on their social media feeds. It's not, hey, fun video we did. I don't see Craig Groeschel doing that. They all have huge LED walls at their church. All those cameras that used to travel around and do things have become stationary and mounted in their buildings.
At Central, when we were there a couple of weeks ago, they did have a camera that was flying over our heads back and forth, which is a little distracting at times. It was on a wire, like you would see on a football stadium, that you see it go flying across the field. They had one of those that was flying across our heads.
Yeah. And I mean, and I get and I'm not against all of that. I'm for good production, not against it. I'm for it. I wonder, like, are we sitting in a season of in the last 3 to 5 years where smaller churches are sitting here wondering, like, how do I create Jimmy Fallon videos? Which, again, nobody's doing this stuff anymore. How do I recreate a Jimmy Fallon thing? How do I do? You see some churches that'll do things like they'll line up their staff and they'll hold a Taylor Swift face or a face of a Bible, or they'll hold up a sign that says Taylor Swift or the Bible, and they'll play a quote, or they'll say a quote, somebody will say it, and they'll be like, did Taylor Swift say that, or is it from the Bible? And they'll have to guess. And
you had guys who made their living off of creating these videos and selling them online for churches that didn't have the resource. I wonder,
skit guys are still active, by the way.
But who's buying those?
They have changed their format. They're doing these things that are almost like cool intro videos and things to stuff. And then I think they still have a market because they were so good. They were great storytellers on stage. I think they're a unique anomaly. Bean and Bailey was another one back in the day that was in that circle with me and you. And they actually popped up as something that my boys were at within the last couple of years. But it was like, they were fine. And I'm going, fine. Like, I remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I'm like I'm a 90s. I'm from the 1900s. But, like, I just wonder, too, like, is there something in the last 5 years-ish, give or take a couple on this side, that we are seeing some of these bigger churches that are looking at this, that we're putting the time into these productions, and it's the same conversation you and I were having in the late 90s and early 2000s around student ministry, and going, we can't keep up with MTV. We could, if we had the biggest budget in the world, we could not fund, and kids are not going to want to come to our version of it. And so that's part of my thought is, has the church missed it? And like Jesus was just walking down the street, sitting with people, and did the church get too, and I understand in the world, not of it, and I don't think anybody was of the world doing those videos. I enjoyed singing Santa Went Down to Georgia. I enjoyed singing Live Like You Were Dying one Sunday morning at church. I mean, I love doing Like we did a theme song video that is probably on YouTube somewhere. And we sang and did that at church. And me and John Oakley bounced back and forth just between a bunch of TV theme songs and stuff like that we kind of stole from Jimmy Fallon that he did on one of his things with the cast of a TV show. I love all of those things, but I just wonder if the church got so busy being attractional that we forgot to be disciples. And now we're seeing this big, almost, is it fair to say, sorry, there's never an overcorrection to be more like Jesus. And so I don't know how to say this other than to say, like, are we kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Is there a level of attractional? Are there some of these things, fun things that we could still be doing that don't take away from helping people be disciples that are making disciples, but yet are giving people maybe a front door to walk through a building, to hear the gospel, to hear the story of Jesus, that may never do that if they had to sit and watch an entire sermon on Facebook?
I think that's a great thought. Great question. I don't have an answer for that.
These are the things that keep me up at night.
Yeah, we do. We promised that this was going to be the last episode.
We have 3 questions we need to answer.
This thing. We've got several questions that we need to answer. And I want to give our listeners, because I feel like this has been a great conversation. If you stuck with us, though, I do want to give you some things. Let's talk through people that are listening around the globe here and saying, okay, so how do I evaluate whether or not we're prioritizing discipleship effectively? How does a church go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I think, and this is going to sound snarky, and I don't mean for it to, it really starts with evaluating not what's happening on Sunday, but what's happening Sunday afternoon back through Sunday morning of the following week.
Yeah, I agree. Measure engagement beyond Sunday morning.
Yeah. Are your people, I mean, that's the whole thing. One, your people are going to follow your lead typically, and it's going to take a long time. And that's something that we talk about. Like, it's going to take, you and I talk about this, and again, we say things a lot, but we pass a lot of videos around on our staff at church, and sometimes somebody will send something, and we'll have, because we're reading through a book together, or we're all talking about something, and we're 6 months into a conversation, and the video will drop in and be like, oh man, we got to start using that as how we talk about generosity, or, oh man, that's got to be this, or we need to put this here. And the question usually comes up is, okay, how do we bring the 500 people along between our 3 campuses that have not been thinking about this night and day for the last 6 months?
Yeah.
And that's the same thing you've got to think about, is like, hey, you're stepping into something, and in full transparency, I haven't always lived this relational discipleship model. I think it's a very Jesus-y way to sit. Jesus sat with people. He also got away alone a lot. It's just, Luke 5:16. I mean, and Jesus got alone a lot. I mean, it's like these moments, like there's some things we don't do. But if you start having coffee with a couple of specific people 2 or 3 times a month for the sole purpose of caring for them, hearing their story, and being a disciple maker, it's going to take a little bit of time for your church to see, or maybe for some transformation to happen. That person comes in and gets baptized, and in their testimony video, or when they're sharing on Sunday morning, that morning when they get baptized, maybe they're the part of the end of the sermon, and you go straight from that into the baptistry, and you kind of take care of those things. There could be something in that people start to go, oh, that's different. And if it's newer for you and it's not how you've been living your life, it's going to take a minute for the people you're leading to kind of get into that space. So don't be discouraged, but don't let up. Like find a way. And I'm bad at this. I am the world's worst. And I think I ask this question to our staff sometimes to get answers from me, because I'm going, okay, the 9 practices of John Mark Comer. How do we get everyone in the entire world to pray, fast, read scripture, meditate, be in silence and solitude and Sabbath and generous and serving? How do we get everybody to do that tomorrow? And it's like, well, it's not reality, because you're not doing it, Robert. You're not doing all of those things. Not all 9 of those. And there's way more than that. And John Mark will say that. These are just 9 practices that they saw in Jesus's life that are really good for us. And that's the same thing as a leader. So that's my thought. What do you think in that space?
Yeah, I want to give our listeners some benchmarks that they can look at, that they can evaluate their own church, where they're at, some things, and give some benchmarks on what a healthy, transformational, discipleship-driven church could look like.
And I'm the emotion and you're the benchmarks.
Allergy season
is
all over.
We are both on cough drops and lots of liquids this morning to get through this show.
And so where I've spent way too much time the last couple of weeks researching and looking at statistics and how things work, what the latest trends are in church leadership and growth. And so I looked at stuff, and I'll put all this research in our show notes from Barna, from Lifeway, from Pew Research Center. Looked at what
3 pretty good research places.
Some of the top names in church growth: Tom Rainer, Carrie Nieuwhof, Tony Morgan, Ed Stetzer.
I thought you were about to say Tony Marr, and I was like, there you go.
There you go. That's not one of those at all. But so this is not just me pulling stuff out of the air. Spent a lot of time researching this over the course of the last couple of weeks, because I want our listeners to not just hear our broad thoughts, but here's some actual practical things that you can look at and evaluate yourself and see how you're doing.
Nope, that's good.
So looking at, we talked about this last week, percentage of regular attenders that are in small groups. You should pretty well have a good idea of what your regular attenders are. And I like to use the term regular attenders and not members, because I think members can be a bit misleading, and sometimes that's both ways. We have one church locally that in the directory of ministry says that they're a church of 750 people. And yet if you were to go on a Sunday, on a good Sunday, they're pulling 100, maybe 150, but they have 750 people that have placed their membership and are still on their roster at their church. So they say they're a church of 750 people. So, and then you've got other churches that don't do membership. And so if you were to go off the people that call themselves, that would say, this is our church, they would say, oh, well, we've got, 200 people that would say this is their church. And as we've talked about so many times on this show, if you were to take the people who call your church home versus the number that are sitting there on a Sunday morning, the number that call your church home is going to be much greater, because the norm now is to come once, twice a month. And not every Sunday. So
the number you have on Sunday is probably about double that.
Yeah. So
take really your attendance.
Take the people that you would say, not that what are the people that I have seats in here, but what are the people that regularly attend this, and however you want to classify that, however you want to define that. I've seen some churches that define that a regular attender as someone that comes once every other week. I worked at a church, I think we've talked about this before, that in leadership meetings with the key staff and the elders, we set a definition of a regular attender at the church was someone who came once every 7 weeks. Landed on is so once every 7 weeks.
If they came once every 2 months, they weren't.
We're not a regular
once every
attender.
7 weeks.
Every 7 weeks, you're a regular attender. So all of this is going to based off of however your church defines what a regular attender is. And we could give you our opinions on that, but we're not going to do that today, because that's something that your church needs to decide for each of you. But
just not once every 7 weeks.
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so. But in looking at those regular attenders, a healthy benchmark for regular attenders in small groups should be somewhere around the 50% mark. You'll see some churches that will claim they're as high as 70. We talked about that. I don't remember if we talked about that on the mic or off the mic last week or the week before, but 50% is a healthy benchmark. If you see half of your people are engaged in a small group, Sunday school class, whatever
your system is for small groups,
then the next step in that is serving, right? That as we've talked about this roadmap, this path that we want our people to go on, engaging beyond Sunday morning in a small group and in Sunday school, in some sort of community, is generally pretty universally a next step, I would say, for most churches. And then the next step beyond that is probably serving in some capacity. A general rule of thumb is you should want to see 40%. 40% of your regular attenders that are serving. So 4 out of every 10, I just did the math for people that don't quite understand percentages there. 4 out of every 10. And then percentages of first-time visitors who take that next step, whatever that next step is. Okay. If that next step is going to a get to know us class, if that next step is signing up for a ministry opportunity, whatever that next step is, if you don't have a next step, then I would say that's your next step. As a church leadership is figure out what your next step is. When someone comes to your church for the first time and they say, okay, I'm here, now what? What's my next step? And we've talked about this 2 weeks ago, that for a lot of churches, there isn't a next step. It's just, you just keep coming, come back next week. And that's your next step. And then your next step after that is come back the next week, and then maybe come back sometime after that, and just keep coming. And there's never a next step. So if you don't know what that next step is, that's your next step as a leadership, is figure out that next step. But you should see 25 to 35% of your first-time visitors take a next step. Okay, that should be what you're seeing. Now, retention of new believers, Tom Rainer defines that as new believers who remain engaged in your church 6 months after their conversion. Okay, so this is not a first-time guest. This is someone who is a new convert to Christianity, a new believer, placed their hope, their faith, their life in Jesus, that you want to see 60 to 75% of new believers remain engaged at the 6-month mark, which to me, I was a little shocked at that. I thought 60% seemed a little low on that, but several different outlets that I was reading and researching on were giving those figures, that it's one thing to attract people to faith, but churches have to be intentional about discipling new believers.
Yeah.
And so often we think that, hey, we introduced you to Jesus, now just kind of coast.
And there is some level of people may float away from your gathering because they just don't enjoy your gathering. And honestly, that's okay. I mean, there's a bunch of churches for a reason. But the thing to echo what you're saying there, the thing I would say is people will stay where they feel connection. And if we're doing discipleship well, somebody's going to show up and sit in the row because the person beside them cares for them.
Yeah.
And so it can't just be, hey, that's the world I grew up in. Did our job. Heaven, not hell. We win. Done. And there's no other effort to help people grow in Jesus.
I had a church that I was very, very involved with. Love this church. Love the people there. Very, very dear. Huge part of my life. And I loved this. I talked about this. I even taught this sometimes, that they were an evangelism church. And they put all of their focus into this attractional and leading people to Jesus. And then the discipleship, they didn't do very well. And they said that, they knew that. And there was a church literally a half a mile down the street from them that was another fairly large church, 1,500, 2,000 people, that did discipleship very well, did not do evangelism very well. And they made it known. The church that I was a part of made it known that we do evangelism incredibly well. So you come to our church, we will introduce you to Jesus. You spend 2-3 years and then go to this other church down the road.
Oh my goodness.
Because and I thought there was a 10-year period in my leadership that I thought that was amazing. You know what you're doing well. You do that great. Do it to the best of your ability, and then hand them off to someone who does this other thing really well. You just keep focusing on doing what you do great. Let them focus on what they do great. And I thought that was an incredible ministry model. Until I realized it's not.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great ministry model.
But that's part of the struggle that we sit in so many times. And I want to get back to these really kind of tangible, actionable things you're talking about.
Yeah, I've got a few more for you.
Yeah, because that's the struggle that we sit in is this space of, like, when we're young, we really are. I mean, we're basing off of how we were brought up, off our upbringing, our culture, and just our beliefs of what we know to be right or true. And that's why Paul talks about develop your own faith with fear and trembling and step into some of these things. And that goes for us as leaders as well. We have to develop a good leadership style and strategy. I mean, I'm preaching to myself here. And Tony, you know I am. I mean, we have these conversations on a somewhat consistent basis. Like, I'm preaching to myself on this. Like, you've got to develop these things with some fear and trembling of the fact of that here's the standard that the scriptures are holding us to as leaders. And we are responsible and God is, I mean, and we will be judged harshly on that space. And so we need to take that seriously. And so, yeah, when we're young, we start making decisions based off what we know, but there's too many resources, and especially with the internet and so many other things that you can get information really fast from, just no reason to not. I had a friend the other day, we were talking about social for his church, and he just said, I just realized I'm being lazy. He said, getting a video, he said, for $200 a year, there's a program that will do, well, $200 personally is a lot, for me at times. But he's like, for $200 a year, there's a program I can drop a YouTube link in, and it gives me 15 clips of my sermon already edited and done. It's actually less than $200 a year. And he said, I just found out it was more laziness, he said that it used to be hard. Now it's laziness. So anyway, benchmarks.
Yeah. So what was the last one that we left off on?
We left off with, you were talking about, it led to you talking about the churches with, your church was doing one thing, discipleship, another church
new
was
believers.
Doing,
new believers.
New believers.
What are you doing with
yeah.
new believers? Yeah. So talked about how you should see 60% of your new believers are still engaged within your church within 6 months.
And I would agree with you. That feels a little low, but I think that there's probably 20% that are just going to prefer a church down the road, and that's okay as long as they're growing in their faith and is a good Bible believing church.
Yep. All right. These next couple are ones that I think are really important, that are not just for understanding discipleship process, but a healthy church and a healthy Christian, a healthy follower of Jesus, is that you should see that 40 to 60% of your regular attenders are actively engaged in Scripture outside of Sunday mornings. And
40% of your regular attenders are engaging Scripture outside of Sunday morning.
Outside of Sunday morning.
Okay.
Yep. And I think that's a huge sign of discipleship, is that discipleship isn't just about church attendance. We've talked about this. It's about personal spiritual growth. And surveys, there are so many surveys and data on Bible reading, devotions, prayer life, and the truth is that the vast majority of people who would say that they are Christians are not engaged in that outside of a church-driven function. And so I probably should have said 40 to 60% outside of a church event. So a small group, a Sunday school class, Sunday morning, Wednesday night, Sunday night, if your church does that. A personally opening their Bible on their app or in person and sitting down and engaging with Scripture outside of a church-driven function.
Yeah.
Now here's one that's gonna really step on some toes and have some people, probably not with our listeners, but have them saying, yeah, I don't know how well we're hitting that. The sign of someone that you're seeing your church is a discipleship, is a transformational church and not just an attractional church. You should see 50 to 65% of your regular attenders are regular givers to your church. If you're a church that is really focused on creating disciples, 50 to 65% of those regular attenders should be regular givers to your church.
Yeah. Because, I mean, there is a maturity. Generosity is such a big part of our obedience. I mean, it really is. I mean, if it's all God's. And I know there's some, and we actually had this conversation one day. I know there's conversation just between even a lot of churches about, oh, is it just what I feel right to give, or is it 10%? And not even getting into that. But like you because you didn't set a number, you just said giving.
Yeah.
And so you didn't set a percentage. And so people can get bent out of shape. Well, until they're all giving 10% plus being generous on top, they're not doing their job. Well, let's just take all that aside. Are they giving it all? And if they are, and I'm thankful to say, I know we're past that number. I love how generous, like the people I live life with every week, like I love how generous they are, and it's incredible what they can what we accomplish because of their generosity and do.
Yeah, so I think that's something that's very easy to figure out. You don't have to look. We've spent episodes talking about this. You don't have to see what everyone's given, but just a simple report.
I don't want to see our people. You said, you've been in spaces where some pastors want to, and I don't know that we felt like there was a right, wrong, or indifferent. For me, I don't want to see a number. I do get a list that says these people gave in the last 12 months, and I can write a card. I can say thank you. I can do whatever.
And I love this one that I got from Carrie Newhoff. There you go. I loved this one that we talked about volunteering earlier, right? And we talked about the percentage of people that we should see in volunteer roles, that we should see 40 to 60% of your regular attenders that are serving. But then I love this one, that you should see 15 to 25% of people who step into volunteer roles move into a leadership role within 2 to 3 years of stepping into a volunteer role. And so it goes from just being a volunteer once a month to actually leading in something within 2 to 3 years of you stepping into that volunteer role.
Yeah. And so like if you've got 50 people who are serving in your church over a 12 to 24 month period, you should see 7 to 8 of those people step into a higher leadership role that they're making ministry happen. I saw a post today that said, like, your responsibility as a pastor and a leader at a church should be to train someone else to do your job. And that's where those people come from. There's leaders men and women who step in and go, I love children's ministry. Man, I'm really passionate about students. I love worship or creative or tech or I'm a decent communicator. Would you help me in leading this Bible study? And all of a sudden they start leading a Bible study well, and they team teach with somebody on a Sunday. And next thing you know, the pastor's looking and going, that person could replace me. And that's a good thing. It's not a scary thing. And I hope people know, last week when I said, like, I told Northridge that, hey, we messed up, Tony spoke, and I'm afraid, like, I'm joking because I don't care. Like, the moment,
and I don't want your job.
You don't want my job, and I don't care. But like, I mean, it's fine. People are starting to go, hey, are you ever going to speak at our church again? But like, it's a 12-week period, and I've spoke 3 times in 12 weeks. And I needed that break for one. I think we talked about that a little bit in one episode. Like, I'm kind of mentally, emotionally, spiritually needed that break. And I'm in a really, really good place right now. But like, it's been incredible for me. But I love having a group of people that I can trust, that I can lean into, and they're all better than I am. And I'm thankful, and I don't care. I mean, that doesn't affect me whatsoever. Like, I'm thankful for what I get to do. I love that I get to do it. But me being able to step in and have people come alongside me, and that's how, I don't know. I guess I think about Moses and just he's holding the staff. And I look at this sometimes of like, I'm in a season where I was just tired. We had a lot happen.
We all need our Aarons and our Hurs.
We do. We need some people that'll bring the rock up, sit us down, and hold our arms for a little bit. And this was just a season where, honestly, like, somehow it's like almost different. Even this is bad theology. It's almost like God said, Robert, you don't even have to hold the stick. Like, these guys are just going to hold it for 12 weeks. And you're going to, like, 3 times in 12 weeks, you're going to hold that. And so the rest of the time, they're just going to hold it and do it. And I think that's the thing, is as we develop good leaders, it gives us space to catch our breath and to do some things. Yeah. I like those. Those are good punch lists.
Had one more. You want to hear it?
Uno mas. Let's do it.
One more, and then we'll wrap this thing up. That I think this is important, that you should be seeing if you're a church that is focused on transforming people from just attenders into disciples, that you should see 20 to 40% of your regular attendees that are involved in outreach or missions in some form. It doesn't mean they're going to Haiti once a year, but they're involved in outreach in some way.
There's a women's ministry. There's a men's ministry. They're helping with addiction and recovery ministries. They're working at a teen or children's after-school program, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, something like that. They're plugged in, doing ministry, helping and serving volunteer coaching.
A church that is focused on discipleship should be outwardly focused, not inwardly focused.
That's one of my favorite phrases that I heard Andy Stanley say the other day, and I'd never heard him say this. I've listened to him for 20 years. He's like, we wanted to create outward-facing churches, and I thought, what a beautiful statement. I mean, churches that are about the kingdom, not about themselves.
So I think summarizing everything that we've said for the last 3 weeks, attractional and transformational churches don't have to be in opposition with each other. You can be both. And there's a rhythm that sometimes something weighs a little heavier than others, but everything should be pointing people towards Jesus and towards a deeper pursuit of him and looking more like him.
Yeah, and this isn't an official ad read, but I would just say if you're struggling, one, we're here for you. But two, if you're struggling and you're going, I just need some help. And that's really what Higher Ministries is about. And so reach out, especially to Tony in that. His contact information is usually somewhere in a show note, or you can go to higherministries.com and click the about page or the contact page, probably the best way to do that. And you can step in, and there's people who want to help you navigate these things. There's some Aaron and hers that want to be there and journey alongside you.
Yeah, there is. All right. Well, that is all the time that we have for this edition of the Pulpit and Porch. We want to thank you for going on this journey the last 3 weeks of attractional versus transformational. And we hope that you've gleaned something out of this conversation that maybe can help you in your own life, in your own ministry, and in your leadership, wherever that is. If you would like more information on how you can find out more about these resources that we've talked about, you can find us on all of the social medias. Find the Pulpit and Porch on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, and on the World Wide Web at higherministries.com. Again, we want to encourage you to like the Pulpit and Porch podcast, subscribe to the Pulpit and Porch podcast on multiple platforms if you want to, and share the Pulpit and Porch podcast. You sharing it helps others find our show and engage with us in ways that maybe are beneficial for them and for us. So again, we hope that you have a great rest of your week. Focus on leading people towards Jesus, and we'll talk to you next week.